Zerubbabel that was the leader of the people in the beginning, during the times of the beginning of the second Testament.
Okay, good morning. Thank you everyone for coming. We're going to be discussing today, Bez Hashem, the sugya, which is, of course, again, Ben Yana Diyoma. It's applicable to this time of year, the time Ben Abtzarim. Some of the Gemaras which discuss the halachos of Zecher Mikdash, and as well the halachos of Zecher Churban. So I'd like to start with the Mishnah in Sukkah, which is number 1 on the source sheets. The same Mishnah also appears in Rosh Hashanah, and a very similar Gemara there. The Mishnah says as follows: Rishona originally, Hayalulav Nito Mikdash Shiva. The lulav was taken by the Beis Hamikdash all 7 days of Sukkot, but in Medina, everywhere outside of Yerushalayim, away from the Beis Hamikdash, Yom Echad was only taken 1 day, and this is learned down from the Psukim in the Torah. However, Mishachar Beis Hamikdash, once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, we're talking here about the second Beis Hamikdash. Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana. Sheyeh lulav nito b'Medina Shiva Zecher Mikdash. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai decreed that we should take the lulav as well nowadays, all 7 days of Sukkot, to commemorate what used to be in the Beis Hamikdash. So here we have a halacha mufareshes b'Torah. The Torah tells us specifically that in Medina it's only 1 day, the first day of Yontif, and only by the Beis Hamikdash it's all 7 days. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai felt, we'll discuss shortly why, that now that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, we have to make sure that we continue to do it all 7 days anywhere we are throughout the globe. Furthermore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was Mesakin v'shiyehei yom hanaf kulei aser, the day of waving should be completely aser. What's that referring to? That's the second day of Pesach, where we have the mitzvah to bring the carbon ha'omer, which allows the new wheat, the chadash, to be eaten in the Medina throughout anywhere besides the Beis Hamikdash, and so technically that should be mutter. Now we have no Beis Hamikdash; it should be mutter immediately in the beginning of the second day of Pesach, because in the times of the Beis Hamikdash the carbon omer was materit. Now there's no carbon omer, so the day should be materit. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that the whole second day of Pesach should as well be usher in the new grain, and we should have to wait till the third day of Pesach to partake in the new grain. So the Gemara asks, how did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai know this concept that it's appropriate to make Zecher Mikdash? So the Gemara expounds on Rabbi Yochanan to Amakro. We quote the pasuk in Yirmiyah which says, "Ki ale arucha loch." Hashem says, I will heal you from your wounds, and from within the wound itself I will find the healing. I am Hashem, ki nidacha karulach, because you are called, you the Jewish people, us, we are called the forsaken one by the nations of the world. Tzion hi doresh ein la. Tzion, it is referring to the Beis Hamikdash. Doresh ein la, there's no one to look out for it, so to speak. The Gemara darshans doresh ein la. Since no one is seeking out for it, that is a teviyah on us, that is forcing us to actually proactively now go out and do things to remember the Mikdash. So from this pasuk in Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai pulled up this idea of Zecher Mikdash, and from here the Gemara says is the source that we take lulav all 7 days of Sukkot, and as well it's going to be the makar for the next halacha at the whole second day of Pesach is Asr and Chodesh as well. The Gemara just continues a couple more lines over here. Why are we asering the whole second day of Pesach? My time of the Gemara asks, because Meheira Yibon Beis Hamikdash, speedily in our days, the Beis Hamikdash should be rebuilt. When everyone will say, Yishtake, last year, Milo Yachamnu Beheir Mizrach, we ate Chodesh right away, the morning of the second day of Pesach. So now also, Hashanami Nechol. The Gemara says, people won't realize the Ishtake, the previous years, the Lo Havi Beis Hamikdash, there was no Beis Hamikdash, Her Mizrach Heter, the fact that the sun rose in the east was just allowed it. Hashadika Beis Hamikdash Omrat, you have to wait for the carbon omer to be brought, whatever time of day that was. You know, it's typically in the morning, but you have to wait till, let's say, for argument's sake, 9 o'clock in the morning. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, in order to make sure people don't come to this mistake, we'll say the whole second day of Pesach is Asr in Chodesh. So again, very clearly, the Gemara here is telling, the Mishnah told us 2 takanas Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted. Number 1, we take lulav all 7 days of Sukkot. Number 2, the whole second day of Pesach is Asr b'Chodesh. The makar for this concept is the pasuk in Yirmiyah. This is an important point. Rabbi Yochanan explains, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's takana is based on a pasuk of Yirmiyah, the end of the pasuk of Tzion hi dorish ein la, no one seeking out Tzion, and therefore we have to be proactive and seek out to remember the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in Shuvas points out, just to quote one line of the Tshuva here, it's a much longer Tshuva, but just to pull out one line, where he writes this point, that the reason why we take lulav all 7 days of Sukkot The Gemara is telling us it's to remember the Beis HaMikdash. So he says it's imperative that we teach our children and we teach our household members that the reason why we're taking the lulav nowadays, all 7 days, is not because it's a mitzvah in the Torah. It's not a mitzvah in the Torah. It's a mitzvah for us to remember the Beis HaMikdash. And by taking the lulav for 7 days, we're actively remembering the Beis HaMikdash. People often don't think of this. Why am I taking the lulav a second day? Because it's Sukkot, I'm taking lulav. It's true it's Sukkot, that's why we're taking lulav. It's not Chanukah, we don't take the lulav on Chanukah. But the reason why we're taking it on the second, third, and fourth day, etc., is because we have to be proactively thinking about what we're lacking and what we had the splendor and the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash. It's something to remember when it comes Sukkot.
But only the first day is the Raisa.
First day only is the Raisa, nowadays, out of the Beis HaMikdash, correct. And the Beis HaMikdash itself, all 7 days with the Raisa. There is a shita in the Rishonim, which Rabbi Yashiv Zatzal was machmir for, that holds that even Bisman Hazeh, in the old city of Yerushalayim, there's still a chiyuv de Araisa to take lulav and esrog, and therefore Rabbi Yashiv and others in Yerushalayim have this minhag as well, that they would go dafka every day of Chol HaMoed to the old city and shake lulav and esrog again there, because therefore they get that, they fulfill that obligation according to those opinion of the Rishonim that hold even Bisman Hazeh, there is a chiyuv deraisa. That's not the mainstream approach, so to speak. If we have the opportunity to be in Yerushalayim, Beis HaMikdash is not rebuilt. It's a great schus to. You spend all that money. People spend thousands of dollars to take their family to for Yontif to Sukkot to Eretz Yisrael, and then they have this opportunity in the mitzvah. Often they miss out because they're going up north, south, whatever. All this great sightseeing, but it's a great opportunity for a mitzvah if you have the option of doing it.
It's only in the old city.
Old city, yeah, there where you can see the kaisel, yeah. Okay, so Chassam Sofer number 2, page number 2 in the booklets on source number 3. Chassam Sofer on the Gemara there in Sukkah raises a couple of very key questions here. Before I get to Chassam Sofer, I just wanted to point out, although I'm just only speaking out this Gemara right now of Zecher HaMikdash, there are other cases in Halacha as well where we do things Zecher HaMikdash. Just to mention a few. The Gemara in Yuma discusses a fascinating concept that used to be in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, where they wanted to make sure the Kohen Gadol stayed up all night. They didn't want him to sleep the night of Yom Kippur for specific reasons. The Gemara did discuss they shouldn't come to any tumah, and they kept him up all night. The Gemara discusses one of the ways he used to keep him up all night was having the people in Yerushalayim up all night learning Torah. Yom Kippur night, what else is there to do? Everyone's learning Torah. And the Gemara discusses even after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, there were people who stayed up all Yom Kippur night and learned Torah. To do it, Zecher HaMikdash, like the way it used to be in times of the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara says, though, that most people discontinued that practice because, unfortunately, not everybody was capable of learning Torah all night, and people would come to do Averos instead of learning Torah, so it wasn't worth the fact people were staying up all night. But that idea the Gemara brings was the Zecher HaMikdash. I saw from Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal, he brought down, his Talmidim recorded that he lamented on certain things that he felt that in Europe, the Jews kept certain customs that he felt got lost in America. And one of the customs he felt was that in Europe, he said he never saw anybody leave shul on Yom Kippur. There's no such thing, Yom Kippur night. Where'd you go? Home? What are you going home for? There's no Suda, there's nothing to do. He stayed in shul all night. He said it was Pashat as a kid. All the men stayed in shul Yom Kippur night. He said he couldn't understand how it became in America that everyone goes home Yom Kippur night and has a nice, comfortable sleep in their bed. That was one of the things he lamented that he missed from his European days. But anyway, the Gemara discusses Rav Soloveitchik from Boston. So, anyways, the Gemara discussed that as an idea of doing that as a Zecher HaMikdash. Another idea the Gemara discusses Zecher HaMikdash we're all familiar with, Kairech, the sandwich we make by the Pesach Seder, right? It's Zecher HaMikdash Kehillel, Bizman Shebeis HaMikdash HaYikayim, right? Hillel had this whole sandwich of Pesach Matzah and Mar, so we don't have the Pesach nowadays, unfortunately, but we have a sandwich to represent that idea of Zecher HaMikdash. There's another interesting halacha we have in Birchas Kehanim. We're all familiar with, we're trained from when we're young, that when the Kahanim raise their hands to Duchen, you can't look. Kahanim cover their hands with the talis, we cover our face with the talis. If you're a little child, you go on your father's talis, it's very exciting, you can't look at the Kahanim. Now, where does that come from? That comes from the fact that Gemara tells us that in the Beis HaMikdash, when the Kahanim would Duchen, the Shechina, something would come down, there would be some presence there resting on the hands of the Kohanim, and it was forbidden to even look for a second at the hands of the Kohanim. However, the halacha nowadays, the Mishnah Berurah says, according to the Magen Avram, that we can't be mistakel at the hands of the Kohanim. Means we can't stare excessively at the hands of the Kohanim. But he says, Riyah ba'alma, just to quickly, if you see it for a second, you didn't do anything wrong. But why don't? Because nowadays, we're having the Berachas Kohanim only, it's only on Yom Tovim, but we don't have the same madrega of the Shechina coming down like it was in the Beis HaMikdash. But we try to keep this halacha, not to look at the hands of the Kohanim as well, for the same idea, says the Mishnah Berurah, as a Zecher HaMikdash. That's what they did Berachas Kohanim time of the Mikdash, so we try to emulate the way they did it there as well. These are just it comes up many other places on Halacha as well, but this is the main Gemara which discusses Zecher Mikdash. That's why I brought out this particular Gemara. Now to the Chassam Sofer, which is again source number 3 on the sheets. The Chassam Sofer lays down 3 basic questions on this Gemara. He says, okay, like we said before, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made this takana after the second Beis HaMikdash. So he asks, what happened after the first Beis HaMikdash? Did the Nevi'im make takanos? If the Nevi'im did make takanos, so what did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai do 400 plus years later? What was he mechadesh? He wasn't mechadesh anything. Of course, maybe in the years the second Beis HaMikdash didn't have to do it, but we wouldn't say Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted it. It was already in place from before. If you'll say that the Nevi'im did not institute these decrees, asked the Chassam Sofer in the second question, then why not? Why didn't the Nevi'im do it? The pasuk implies in Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah is talking about by the first Beis HaMikdash that Tzion needs drisha. We have to seek it out. So again, it's a 2-part question. If they did do it, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't invent anything. If they didn't do it, why not? Why wasn't there this idea that we're seeking out to remember the Beis HaMikdash? Thirdly, the Chassam Sofer points out is that the pasuk tells us that Hashem will bring us the refuah because we are forsaken and Tzion is forsaken. That's what the pasuk says, like we spoke out before. Ask the Chassam Sofer, if we're not Tzion is not forsaken anymore. We're remembering Tzion. It's not lost. We're doing all these institutions we have to remember Tzion. So are we, so to speak, shooting ourselves in the foot by now remembering all the glory of the Beis HaMikdash? Again, the pasuk was lamenting the fact that Tzion is forsaken. It's all forgotten, the whole Beis HaMikdash. It's not true. We have all these various takanos that Chazal are telling us to do to go for remember the Beis HaMikdash. So ask the Chassam Sofer, are we fulfilling the verse, or are we now saying that we can't fulfill the verse can't be fulfilled, so to speak, because we're actually doing things which are remembering the Beis HaMikdash? So Chassam Sofer explains, he takes the pasuk and he brings a medrash. The medrash on this pasuk says, interesting medrash, it says, the pasuk said, the pasuk in Yirmiyah that the Gemara was quoting, the beginning of the pasuk said, Mimakaisecha erpa'echa, from your wounds itself, I will heal you. The medrash says, this is only a midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that sometimes from within the wound itself could come the healing. He says that was the chisaron, that was what the problem was at the binyan, at the building of the second Beis HaMikdash. When after the short golus of 70 years, the Purim story, etc., we're coming back to the Beis HaMikdash. But we're not really in charge. The pasuk in Ezra tells us, "Ki avodim anachnu uba'avodeseinu loy azavunu alekeinu vayeta leinu chesed lefnei malchei paras." He quotes the pasuk in Ezra that we were still under the dominion of Koresh and Daryavesh. They allowed us to go back, and they helped us even build the Beis HaMikdash, but we weren't fully free from under their shlita, from under their reign. Says the Chassam Sofer, that was something which was felt, something which was lacking in the binyan of the bias, and therefore ultimately that bias couldn't have a kiyum forever, because it was coming through the fact that we got healed through something that was not pure, so to speak, pure Yad Hashem to bring us back to Tzion. He says, but Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai realized, he says, where I underlined over here, after the destruction of first bias, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai realized they did not do this, they did not actively seek out Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash. Al Kain says, Chassam Sofer, therefore, Klal Yisrael, at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, did not merit to have a full geula. Rak mimaka atzma tikkun refuah. There was only some type of healing from within the malady itself. V'hainu deka'ar makra, the pasuk which says, "Mimakaisecha erpa'echa," this pasuk in Yirmiyah, v'loi refuah kaidin lamaka. It was not a fulfillment of what Chazal tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always putting the refuah before He gives us the makkah. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai realized why was this a chisaron? Because Tzion he darish ein la. Therefore, at the time of destruction of second Beis HaMikdash, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is there. He's at that kufa. Al zeh lasa is drish l'sin. He says right away, oh, I see the chorban's happening. It's setting into motion. Right away, we have to set up now as the chorban is happening, as we're going into Golos, the refuah kaidam lamaka. The Zecher HaMikdash, he sets up the Zecher HaMikdash kadesh nizke legeula shlema, the refuah kaidam lamaka. In order that now, as the illness, so to speak, of the chorban is setting in, as we're getting stricken with this disease of the chorban, we're already now practicing these acts of helping ourselves of this refuah, so that we'll be already in good shape when the binyan bayis shlishi comes back. He says that's what Chazal also tell us, of course, that before Mashiach was born already before the Churban. Now, what exactly that means doesn't mean necessarily he's alive physically today, but there's a certain aspect of the Gula that's already in place before the Churban happens. The Bayis Shlishi, the Chazal Rashi brings down. The Chazal tell us it's already up. The building is there. It's a prefab building, so to speak. It's ready to come down at the blink of an eye if we're going to be Zecher to it. So all the refuah comes Kaid Lamaka, and that's the Gula Shalema that we're looking forward to in Churban Bayis, in Binya Bayis Shlishi. So that's Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. It's Sian Hidar Shein Law. We have to. It's the refuah Kaid Lamaka. We have to do it. It's true that it could be forsaken if we don't actively think about it. But Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was misaken that we have to do things from the onset, from the beginning of the Churban, or even as the Churban is happening, in order to actively have Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash in our minds. He explains that pshat in the Psukim, and that's pshat, in the Mishnah, where the Mishnah has these two ideas particularly together. Because again, the two things the Mishnah told us was to take the lulav all 7 days, and the next one is Yom Hanaf Kula Yasser. The second day of Pesach is Asr in Chadash. Says the Chassam Sofer, why is this going? What's the juxtaposition? These two things particularly. He says because the Gemara explains. By the fact that we're fulfilling the idea of taking the lulav all 7 days, of doing the Zecher Mikdash, we're going to have right away that the Beis HaMikdash is going to come back, hopefully, Meher B'Yameinu. So that's why the Gemara says we have to keep the second day of Pesach completely Asr and Chadash, because Meher B'Yameinu is going to come right back. We'll say, oh, last year it wasn't like this, meaning it's going to be fresh in our minds, or hopefully it should be fresh in our minds, the idea of what we did in the Beis HaMikdash. Last year we ate Chadash right away in the morning. So that's why the Gemara gets busy. I didn't quote the rest of the Gemara over there in Sukkah. The Gemara gets involved in a technical discussion. When exactly the Beis HaMikdash, what time of day could the Beis HaMikdash be rebuilt? To fit in with this technical issue of being concerned that Chadash won't be available right away for us in the morning. But the idea again is that at the time of the Churban Bayis Sheni, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai is there, and he realizes that we have to set up the Refuah Kaid Lamaka, and therefore he specifically institutes these things now at the Churban Bayis Sheni, although they did not have them at Churban Bayis Rishon. So this is all Shlav 1, stage 1, in Gemaras which are discussing ideas which the Gemara calls Zecher L'Mikdash. Now I'll move on to number 4, on the third page, where the Gemara in Bava Basra at the end of the third parak discusses halachos which are categorized as Zecher L'Churban.
So this takana that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai held actually was before the actual Churban.
And the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah gets involved exactly when Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai lived, and it says he was 40 years. He was a Talmud 40. The Gemara goes through different stages. He lived 120 years, and the Gemara explains it must be that he instituted these takanas before, even though he wasn't a Rebbe yet. He wasn't Rosh Hashiva yet, right? But he wasn't Rosh Hashiva yet. But he as a Talmud, he already brought these ideas up to his Rebbeim, and since they liked it so much, they were masakin it in his name. So it was like, from his beginning of his career, so to speak, as being Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, these takanas set him into place. Right. It's from right.
But it wasn't after the last brick fell down.
Right.
They said, next year let's do it.
No, it was ready from something. I don't know exactly. I can't say exactly the date, so to speak, but it seems like he already had instituted these or set these into motion before the final destruction. So the Gemara in Bava Basra at the end of the third parak now discusses various halachas which are classified as Zecher L'Churban. The Gemara there in Bava Basra is discussing a halacha seemingly unrelated to the Churban. The Gemara there is discussing Bava Basra, and particularly Cheskes Sabatim is dedicated to various halachas of Choshen Mishpat, and there it's discussing, let's say I buy, before we get to that, let's say I want to build up, I own a property which is right next to a Rishus Haram, a public thoroughfare, and I want to extend my house, a porch, some type of balcony, and it goes into a Rishus Haram. It'll butt into Rishus Haram. That's usher because I'm causing a hezek to the people that are in Rishus Haram and come bang into my stuff, and obviously I can't do that. But let's say I buy a property and it already has these easement rights, already has the right to had this balcony already was extending into Rishus Haram, and people already were used to it. So if that was already the chazaka, that's already the way it was. The Mishnah says that if I buy such a property, I can keep it as such. And from that, the Gemara gets into a discussion. What would happen? So let's say a tornado comes, or something happens, and the house falls down, and now I want to rebuild that property. Do I still have the right, to keep that balcony as it was, or now, since the house fell down, I have to keep with the current zoning law, so to speak, and pull back my balcony, it can't go over into Shus Ram at all. And the Gemara at first says, you do not, if it falls down, you do yes have the right to build it up again the same way it was originally. And the Gemara asks, why is that so? We have a halacha that a person, when he builds a house, Bisman Hazeh, cannot build it completely with limestone. He plasters his house, he can't make it with limestone, he can't make it with certain beautiful pictures. I don't know exactly what these pictures were, but sometimes beautiful decorations. Bisman Hazeh, that's the first line where it's unlined. Ein mesaydin, ve'ein mechayrin, ve'ein mefaychin. You can't plaster the house with lime, and you can't make various beautiful images on the house. Bisman Hazeh. However, look, a chatzar misuyedis. If you already bought a chatzar, a house with a whole property that already was fully, limed and it was plastered, then harezu bechaskasa, you can keep it. However, nafla, if it fell down, then you can't build in the same fashion. So how come we said, when it comes to chayshir mishpat, when it comes to halacha of extending our balconies or porches into Shus Ram, we said if it falls down, you have that same legal right to build a balcony. But the halacha of building a beautiful home, building a house that's completely full of plaster or it's plastered with lime, and that the Gemara didn't tell us the reason why not yet, but as we'll see shortly in a moment, that's because of a Zecher, the Churban, remember the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. But if that fell down, you can't rebuild it the same beautiful way. You have to now rebuild it in a way which shows the Zecher l'Churban. The Gemara says, okay, there's a difference between Chayshir Mishpat and this halacha of Zecher l'Churban. And from here, the Gemara now goes into a halacha that a person cannot completely plaster his home, Bisman Hazeh, with full, 100% pure plaster. If he mixes in other ingredients, which sort of diminishes from the splendor and the shine of the house, the Gemara says it's mutter. And this is because of Zecher l'Churban, that we have to remember that fact that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash nowadays, so when we build our own houses, we can't build them in such a splendorous fashion. The Gemara continues the third wide line, it says, Tana Rabbanan. Now the Gemara says a fascinating story. When the second bias was destroyed, there was a group of Prussian, of aesthetics, that they set out, they're making a Prussian club, and there's no meat and no wine anymore. And obviously this was not sanctioned by the Chachamim, and Rabbi Yeshua goes over them and challenges them and says, excuse me, my fine fellow Jews, why have you stopped eating meat and drinking wine? They said, what do you mean? How can we eat meat? We used to have the Beis HaMikdash, and there were karbanos being brought. The Mizbeach ate meat. Now there's no Mizbeach. We can't eat meat. How can we drink wine? It used to be in the base. They had the Beis HaMikdash, and there were all these wine libations, and this chayayim brought on top of Mizbeach. They don't have that anymore. We have to refrain from wine. So Rabbi Yeshua challenges them and says, oh yeah? You're not going to eat meat and drink wine? How can you eat bread? You shouldn't eat bread anymore because part of the menachos, part of the karbanos as well, came with a certain amount of bread. So how can you eat bread? They said, okay, you're right. We'll stop eating bread. We'll just have fruits. You're right. We agree with you. Yeshua says, yeah, fruits. You can't eat fruits anymore. We don't bring bikurim anymore. We used to bring the first fruits to the Beis HaMikdash, to a beautiful mitzvah of bikurim. There's no Beis HaMikdash anymore. You can't eat fruits anymore. They said, okay, you're right. We won't eat fruits from the Zayin Minim, because only the Zayin Minim, the 7 species, those are the ones that have chiv of bikurim. Regular apples and oranges. Okay, we'll get by with apples, oranges, and watermelons, whatever. We'll get by with such a diet. He said, oh yeah? Here comes his checkmate. How are you going to drink water? They used to bring water in the Beis HaMikdash, Nisach HaMayim. It was part of the Beis HaMikdash service. You can't drink water anymore. You shall die of thirst. They said, okay, you're right. What do we do? We're stuck. Okay. So he says, okay. So he says, okay, listen. You guys, you're on the right path, so to speak. You have the good intentions that you want to do things which are Zecher l'Churban. But we can never make a gezerah, we can never set up a decree for Klal Yisrael, something which is impossible. So let me tell you what the Chacham tells us what the halacha is. So he tells them, where it's underlined about halfway down the page, he says, Elakach amru chachamim, Rabbi Yeshua tells them, Sad adam beis basid, you can build yourself a nice house with and plaster it. However, umishayir by davar muat, leave over something which is unfinished. The Gemara says, how much is that? Rabbi Yeshua says it's an amma al amma, roughly 22 inches by 22 inches. Amar Rav Chizdab, and that, where should that be? Keneged HaPesach, it should be near the door, so when you come in, you see it right away. So first of all, he tells them, this is how we do Zecher l'Churban. I'm going to tell you. Number one, in your home, when you build your home, make sure you leave a certain area, amma by amma, so everyone should to remember the Zecher l'Churban when you come into your home. Number two, he tells them, Osa Adam Kol Tarkei Suda. You can set up your Suda, your feast, However, Mishayir Badovrim what? Leave something out off the menu, something which you usually have on the menu, leave it off. The Gemara gives an example of some type of kasa de harsana, some type of fish dish, I know some type of herring. I don't know exactly what it is. Don't serve it to also remember the Churban. He says the next thing Rabbi Shua tells them is a woman could adorn, put on all her jewelry, kol tachshita, but leave something off. The Gemara gives an example exactly what that is. Something called bas tzeda'ah, some type of beauty thing, that treatment the women used to do on the hair that was on the temples. I don't know exactly what it is, but some idea to leave one thing less to remember the Churban. The Gemara says, how do we know? Rabbi Shua says, how do I know we should do this? Where does this idea come from? He says, Shneimar, the pasuk says, you all know it's a famous song, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, if we forget Yerushalayim, tishkach yamini, we should lose our right hand, so to speak. Tidbak l'shayin l'chiki, our tongue should stick to the palate of our mouth, meaning we have an obligation to remember Yerushalayim, otherwise we shouldn't be here. So Rabbi Shua is telling them specifically, these are the things we should do. You had a great idea to cut back and make this whole diet. That's not what Chachamim told us. The Chacham told us these three specific things: in the house to leave an open area, by the Suda to leave off a certain dish, and by a woman when she puts on all her jewelry to use one less piece of jewelry.
In the house, it's only city, plastic.
Okay, we'll get to the halacha. Okay, fine. Hold on that thought for a minute. Then the Gemara says another idea, as many of us are familiar with, when it comes time for a chassan, before he goes down to the chuppah, he puts a little ash on the makom of his tefillin, as well as a Zecher l'Churban. And the Yerushalayim, the Gemara says 2 lines later, v'chol ha'mis'abel Yerushalayim, anyone who mourns properly Yerushalayim, Zecher v'roi v'simchasa, he will merit to see it, God willing, in its splendor, meher b'yameinu. So here's that's a nutshell. Basically, the Gemara is telling us again 3 specific things which are instituted Zecher l'Churban. The Ben Yehoyada, that's the Ben Ishchai, in his Pirush on the Gemara here, he says why these 3 specific things, the house, the table, and jewelry, he says they correspond very nicely to 3 things that we lost. The Zecher of the Churban that we're making in our house, of course, remembers the Zecher of the fact that the bias of Hashem, the Beis HaMikdash, was destroyed. The Zecher that we have on our table, taking off some of our food, is to remember the fact that there's no Mizbeach anymore. The Shulchan of a person is machapert on him like the Mizbeach, the Gemara says in many places. So too, he says we do something different to our table. The tachshitim of a woman holds back on something for jewelry. That reminds us of the fact we don't have the big day kahuna anymore. The big day kahuna, which were the kavod ul teferes as a beauty for the kohen gadol. These are 3 things which Chazal felt could help remind us on a constant basis of Zecher l'Churban. Now, like Meir mentioned before, how does this bottom line translate into halacha l'maisa? So I'm not going to be able to cover all the halacha l'maisa, but I just want to speak at a couple of points of it, and then get to some lumdus in the sugya. The Aruch HaShulchan, which is on source number 5 on the sheets, is very bothered, as many poskim are, that it was not the custom in his day to have see the Zecher l'Churban, to see you walk into people's homes and you won't necessarily see an open area of amma by amma of unfinished wall. And he gets involved in why this is, and I'm just not enough time to speak out Aleph, Beis, and Gimel, but it's nice to see what the Aruch HaShulchan writes in explaining the whole beginning of the sugya. But in Eis Daled he writes, he says the reason why he suggests why a limud schus, a source of merit for people who don't have it nowadays, is he says because nowadays we don't have plaster like they had in the times of Chazal. I'm not in the construction business. I don't know how they make plaster nowadays. I know they use sheetrock a lot. Obviously sheetrock is not plaster and plaster is not sheetrock. But even if you use plaster, he says the plaster we have today is not like they had in times of Chazal. It's not pure. It's already mixed in with many other, I guess not alloys, whatever impurities, so to speak, that you mix in with the plasters. That's already, we don't have what Chazal spoke about. That's perhaps one reason why we don't have a Zecher l'Churban. Later on, at the end of Eis Hey, he says something even different. It's not underlined, but it's towards the end of Eis Hey, the bottom of the left paragraph. I would say about 6-7 lines from the bottom. He says there were some Achroinim who were upset that they saw on their day, instead of leaving an unfinished part of the wall, they would paint a black square on their wall, and that would be Zecher l'Churban. And many Achroinim felt that was not appropriate because The Gemara didn't say that. The Gemara said you should not have an unfinished part of the wall. The Gemara didn't say make it black, but the Aruch Shulchan wants to defend it, and he says Ve'etzleinu by us. He says many people have this black spot on the wall. The kivan the regila, and since people are accustomed that this is a Zecher l'chorban, he writes Shezeu hahekel l'chorban ma lanu im koi v'im koi. Doesn't really make a difference. The Aruch Shulchan learns the Gemara was not telling us specifically this is the only way to do it, only to leave an unfinished part of the wall. If it became a standard that people painted a black square, so to speak, on their wall, and people accept that as Zecher l'chorban, so according to Aruch Shulchan, of course this does not go down without a dispute, but I'm saying the sheet of the Aruch Shulchan is that is sufficient for Zecher l'chorban. Moshe Feinstein and Shuvas Igros Moshe Archaim Chelik Gimel Sum Peivav discusses this at length as well. He also allows such a practice. He's also matamiyah. He's also wondered. He's also bewildered why it's not common practice like the way the Gemara says it. He says the idea is, again, it's the spirit behind the idea that we have to have something in our house which is a Zecher l'chorban, whether it's a black spot or whether it's an unfinished part of the wall. But also, Ramosha writes very clearly, the Daik and the Paiskim, this is only if I am building the house from the onset. Let's say, if you buy a house here, let's say in New City, you buy a house and the person lived there before, let's make an easy case, it was a non-Jewish person, and the non-Jew paints the house in order to sell it. And now you move into a home that was just freshly painted by Tim, the non-Jewish owner who's selling it to you, right? So you don't have an obligation, according to the strict letter of law, to strip that paint and get down to the raw plaster of the wall because it was done properly, meaning the guy who did it did not do any isser. It gets a little sticky if you're buying a house from a Jew who is religious, or maybe even not religious, and built the house from scratch and didn't do it whether or not you're obligated or not. Bottom line is, according to Moshe Feinstein, you're not obligated if it was built in that way and you're moving into a finished product to strip off the wall and make it like that. There are poskim who suggest that you should do it. It's a laudatory to do it, but according to the strict letter of the law, you're not obligated to do it. But nonetheless, even according to Moshe Feinstein, it's appropriate to have something which will commemorate in some way the Churban somewhere in the front, towards the front of the house. Again, according to the strict letter of the halacha, it has to be right when you walk into the door. The front door, it should be somewhere on the front wall, somewhere near that you can see it right away. Other places can say it could be on top of the front door, so when you're leaving you see it, or any other place in the house, near the front door, the side wall, whatever. Every person's house might be slightly configured differently, but it should be something that helps us remember the Churban, and we should feel that the Beis HaMikdash is still lacking. Yeah?
Someone to say Rabbi first, I called Rabbi first about
yeah.
because I really wanted to see the faith of Churban, and I bought a house.
Right.
But not while I went from that. So anyway, so he told me he wouldn't let me slam knock the plaster off.
Okay.
When you paint, don't leave the square.
Okay, very good. So you have sacrifice first that you don't necessarily have to scratch up, but whenever you repaint it, to leave something. I saw a fascinating idea in a similar vein in the Sefer Imre Pinchas, which was from my ancestor, the Pinchas Mikar. It's one of the earliest Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov. That his Talmidim were once in his house and they saw something very strange. He had, wherever there was, some windows in the front of his house. They're all nice, nice windows. And one window was very small as opposed to the other windows. It didn't seem to fit in. And his Talmidim asked him, Rebbe, what's pshat? This window doesn't fit in with the rest. He said, that's a Zecher l'chorban. And it's Talmidim, that's where the story is brought down, and the Svarim deal with it afterwards. Did he mean it that's really fulfilling the halacha, or that's fulfilling the spirit of the law? Because it seemed to be, in many places in Ukraine and other places in Europe at that time, the Goyim wouldn't even allow the Jews to make a Zecher l'chorban in their house. Baruch Hashem, we live today in America, we have a lot of freedom. It seemed like in Europe, in many places, and in Russia as well, the Goyim wouldn't even let us do certain things within our own home, even behind closed doors. They had a certain dominion over us. However, exactly, unfortunately, that was the situation. So he felt this was the only way he was able to mekayim the halacha on some aspect by making the windows, one window of his house in the row, look obviously different and out of place, so to speak, in order to remember the Churban. But again, the idea just bringing out is this is the idea that Paiskim are saying that the Zecher l'chorban, although the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch does clearly define what it is, and many people are able to do it the way it says in Shulchan Aruch, but if we're not, there's other ways that we can still fulfill the halacha.
In the Epstein Academy, they have a unfinished spot on the wall, and there's a plaque on top of it that says this spot was unfinished.
Okay, that's very nice to teach the students a lesson, but the halacha mefureshes is that a Beis Knesset and any binyan of tzibur does not need a Zecher l'chorban. The Be'er Halacha discussed it, so it's good to teach the children this halacha, but technically any shul or anything like that is lahedja. They don't need to have such a Zecher. Let's move on now.
What if you would have a piece of artwork that's the image of the Kotel?
Okay, I was thinking about that. I think it's nice, but I'm gonna say my own idea here. I think it's a good idea and it's great. But if it's one of those art pieces that cost $25,000, I can't imagine that's a Zecher L'Churban. That's because you want to show off that you're an art collector.
$50.
You know, I'm just trying to bring out a point. Meaning, if it's a very fancy piece of art, I think it's not going to bring out Zecher. But if it's something which is just a nice picture and depicts the scene of Jews davening at the Kaisel and the yearning for Mashiach, I think it's great, 100%. I'm just saying, some people, they kid themselves into thinking I'm doing Zecher L'Churban, and because they want to spend their money on a beautiful piece of art, and it's very nice. They could buy, you can buy a Kaisel, you can buy some other image, and they buy the Kaisel. But I think it has to fit in with a certain theme of bringing out the yearning for Mashiach, as opposed to just trying to make our house look like a beautiful palace. Okay, in source number 6 is a copy from the Sefer Rishimas Shiur of Soloveitchik from Boston, written by his Talmud Rabbi Reichman, where he brings out this point we've been kind of discussing till now, but kind of brings it on very strong. He says, it's interesting. We had two Gemaras. We had the Gemara in Sukkah and we had the Gemara in Baba Basra. The Gemara in Sukkah brought the pasuk of Tzia and He Darish Ein Law, that we have to proactively do things to remember the Beis HaMikdash. And we had a Gemara in Baba Basra which brought a different pasuk of Imesh Kachechi Yerushalayim. Tishkach Yemini, and teach us Zecher L'Churban. What are these two ideas? Why don't we have the same pasuk in both places? Meaning, if Emesh Kachech teaches me the idea we have to do things to remember Yerushalayim, so we should have that Gemara. That should be the source for the Gemara in Sukkah as well, to take out lulav all 7 days. If the source is Si and He Darish Ein Law, then the Gemara in Baba Basra, should bring that pasuk as a source that we should do Zecher L'Churban. So our Soloveitchik explains that really there's two separate ideas here. There's remembering the splendor of the Beis HaMikdash, the beauty of what we had, and remembering the destruction. There's a Zecher L'Mikdash, which is the beauty, and the Zecher L'Churban. And he says, really, they're two separate halachos. And really, I saw, I've heard this actually once from Matisyahu Salman Shlita, and the Rav Argumat showed to me in a Sefer Matnas Chaim. Really says the same idea as well. It's always beautiful when you can have a piece in a Lamdish Sefer and the similar idea in a Musar Sefer, really saying the same idea. That there's two aspects of how we remember the Zecher L'Mikdash. Remember the Beis HaMikdash. There's the splendor of it and there's the structure of it. And he speaks it out as follows. The pasuk in Eicha says in the first parak, Zachra Yerushalayim, you have to remember Yerushalayim, the Yemei Anya Umurudeha, the days of its downtroddenness and the fact that it was destroyed. Kol Machmudeh Asher Hayu Yimei Kedem, all its splendor that it was. Says of Soloveitchik, in this pasuk itself, we see both these two halachas. The Yemei Anya Umurudeha, that's the Churban and the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, and there's also Kol Machmudeh, seeing all the splendor of Yerushalayim. He says that's Pshat, he explains it on top of left column, he explains that's Pshat in a fascinating Baal Hamar. The Baal Hamar, at the end of Masechtas Pesachim, discussing the halacha of Sfiras Omer, says a couple of interesting chidushim. One of them I just want to share with you has nothing to do with this per se. He discusses why we don't do a Sveika D'Yayma on Sfiras Omer nowadays. If here we are, we're in Chutz La'aretz. Every other Yontif, we do 2 days of Pesach, 2 days of Shavuos, 2 days of Sukkot. Why don't we do 2 days of Sfiras Omer? That's one question he deals with. I'm not going to discuss that right now. I just want to tell you, I think it's a great discussion he has there. Another question he deals with is why don't we make a Shechayanu on Sfiras Omer? It's a mitzvah. Chazal told us to the mitzvah. I want to make a Shechayanu. So the Baal Hamar says, he says because there's Agmas Nefesh, there's a certain sense of feeling bad because we're sad. We don't have the Beis HaMikdash. As for Soloveitchik, I understand. Zecher L'Mikdash is a reason not to say Shechayanu. On Lulav we say Shechayanu, meaning in a typical year when the first day of Sukkot is not on Shabbos, so of course you say Shechayanu because the mitzvah is the Araisa. But in a year where the first day is on Shabbos, so everyone, even in Eretz Yisrael, they're only taking the lulav for the first time on the second day, and we make a Shechayanu, and there the only reason why we're taking the lulav is because it's Zecher L'Mikdash. So how can the Baal Hamar tell us that the reason why we can't make a Shechayanu on Sfiras Omer is because it reminds us of the Agmas Nefesh? What do you mean? What about lulav? Lulav we make a Shechayanu. Says of Soloveitchik, it's because there's two fundamental ideas that are working differently. The Sfiras Omer is reminding us of what we lost, what we don't have anymore. It's putting us into so to speak almost like a Tisha B'Av mode. It's remembering the Churban. Therefore, we can't say which reminds us of the destruction. Lulav is to remind us of the splendor and the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash, and it's not a Zecher l'churban, rather it's a Zecher to the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash. He says that's why it fits very geschmack. The halacha is, we know another part of the Zecher HaMikdash remembering is that we march around the bima with the Sefer Torah on Sukkot when we're holding a lulav and esrog. Hashem Rabbah do it 7 times, and that also reminds us of the Beis HaMikdash that is to walk around, do hakafas the Beis HaMikdash as well. The halacha though is that unfortunately someone who's in Avel, who's in mourning, he can't walk around. Why? Because it's Simcha. Simcha? What do you mean? It's remembering the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. That's what you would think. Says the Salvechik, no, it is a Simcha because it's reminding us of the great time we had in the splendor of the Beis HaMikdash. That's why an Avel can't do it. It's not to remind us of the destruction, rather it's to remind us of the beauty of the Beis HaMikdash. And Rav Shurkin, my Rebbe Shlita, in his Sefer Harekedem Chelik Beis, also from the notes of Salvechik, says the same idea in the name of his Rebbe Salvechik, and fits it into many of the kinnis. He says this theme goes to many of the kinnis of Tisha B'Av. He particularly speaks out by the kinna called Sia and Haloi Tish Ali, where we contrast some of the things that we do for the splendor of Yerushalayim, and some things we do, unfortunately, to remember the destruction. He fits it into Korach as well. Okay, we don't have time to speak it out. And again, like I said, Matzio Salman Shlita as well, in his Sefer on Moyadim speaks this out in Sukkot, and he also works in very well why this helps us remember why we do Simchas Beis HaShoeva, why we commemorate it. It's such a big thing. You can especially go to Borough Park, Williamsburg, or in Eretz Yisrael, the Rebbes, they have this big Tishim. You can go to 3-4 in the morning. Why are we being so excited? It should remind us of the destruction. So there's also the idea to bring out what we had in the Beis HaMikdash and the beauty of it, and to give us that chizuk to daven stronger for the bringing back of the Beis HaMikdash. I just want to end off with the Mesilas Yesharim at the end of Perek Yud Tes, where he's talking about the idea of chasidus, of being pious in all our mitzvahs, and he says that besides being a chassid in the actual physical carrying out of the mitzvahs, he says another aspect of being a chassid is someone that we have to be mitzta'er tamid, a tsar on the golus and on the churban, and we have to be yisaveh, we have to be desirous and be anticipatory for the geula. And he says, furthermore, he says at the end of the first paragraph, the yispalel tamid, we have to constantly daven al geulasan shal Yisrael, for us to be redeemed, v'hashavas kvod shemayim le'iluyah, and Hashem's glory should return to the Beis HaMikdash. And then the Mesilas Yesharim asks a very hard question. So fine, we have an obligation to daven that the Beis HaMikdash should be rebuilt. We can understand that theoretically. He says, Vim Yoyim HaAdam, in the second paragraph, if a person will ask, Mi ani, who am I? Umani sofun she'espal al golos v'yishlayim. Who am I to daven on the destruction and the Beis HaMikdash? I'm coming 1900 plus years, unfortunately, later. There were so many great tzaddikim before me who davened and cried. They say by the Chassam Sofer that by Sudam Avsekes, he would dip his bread into the tears and he was crying for the Chorban Beis HaMikdash. We're so far removed from that, unfortunately. So, okay, it didn't work for them. Either it'll come or it won't, so to speak. Chas v'shalom. So why am I still davening? Says the Mesilas Yesharim, Tshuvasa B'tzida, the answer is, Lefikach Nivra Adam Yechidi, quoting a Gemara, every person is individualized in this world for a specific purpose, Kedei Shekol Echad Yomar B'Shvili Nivra Olam. Ukvar nachas ruach ulofanav. It's pleasant to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Shiubanov mivakshim muspalmazais. Hakadosh Baruch Hu is desirous and wants us to show a tshuka for the Beis HaMikdash. And even if Hakadosh Baruch Hu tells us no right now is not the right time, because it's not the right time. Nonetheless, we have to daven. We have to do our part. And he says, furthermore, the mission of us, lo yalecha hamalacha ligmar viata ben chayerli batamana. We can't just say we're not going to get the job done anyway. We're not going to do it. That's not the Yiddish Mahalach. Yiddish Mahalach is we have to start and do what we can, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu will figure out when the right time is. But it does not take away from our obligation to daven. And in the Sefer Matnas Chelka, which is Matzio Salman Shlita's notes from the classes from the Vadim he gives on Mesilas Yesharim, so there they bring down different reasons that Matzio Shlita said over. We're going to explain this Mesilas Yesharim. He quoted from the Mabit. The Mabit in the Sefer Beis Elakim says that just like we know, for example, by Moshe Rabbeinu, he pleaded with Hashem 515 tefillos, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, stop. One more, and I'm going to have to let you into Eretz Yisrael. That was the magic number, for whatever reason. So the Mabit says the same thing for accounts when we're in Golos. There's a certain number of tefillas, a certain number of bakashos that Klal Yisrael has to make. We don't know which one, so to speak, is going to be the the $1 million one, so to speak, the last one that's going to Be'ez Hashem open up the gates and let us back. So we can't excuse ourselves by saying, well, what can we do? The previous generations have davened. No, we have to daven in order that we don't know how many tefillos are needed. Furthermore, he says, the Gemara says, like we said before, anyone who's properly mourns for Yerushalayim, he says, what do you mean? We see many great tzaddikim already passed away, and they were misabel Yerushalayim. They definitely properly mourned Yerushalayim. They didn't see the Geula. So what's pshat? So he quotes the Ritva. The Ritva in Tainus explains that it's true. Maybe in their lifetime, their first lifetime, so to speak, they didn't see it. But those who are mis'abal Yerushalayim, Zecher v'roy means that there's different levels of Tchiyas HaMesim. I don't know exactly all the madregas of here, but he says there's the early level Tchiyas HaMesim, the early birds, so to speak. For those people who were Zecher and were properly mis'abal Yerushalayim, they'll get the first Tchiyah. They'll get up first in order to see the Beis HaMikdash. Those who didn't, hopefully they'll get up for the second round, so to speak. But he says in Matisyahu Salman, it's Pasha, the reason why we need to daven is for our own sake. We want to be Zecher to see it. Whether it's before we pass away from this world physically, or will be the early birth to get there first, to get back seats when the Beis HaMikdash comes back. Nonetheless, we have to make sure that we're doing our part to daven properly. I saw just this past Shabbos from Reisman Shli to Rosh Yeshiva Torah V'das, he says over that he used to spend many summers in Eretz Yisrael, and when he was in Yerushalayim for Shabbos, he used to go to the Shiur of Rabbi Yashiv. Rabbi Yashiv gave a famous Shiur in the Tiferes Bechurim Beis Medrash, and he would go for the Shiur Shabbos afternoon, and somebody in the crowd recognized him, Rosh Yeshiva from Torah V'das, Reisman was here, and they escorted him to sit next to Rabbi Yashiv by the Shiur, and he sat next to Rabbi Yashiv by Mincha as well on Shabbos. And he wanted to nutzais the opportunity, he wanted to take advantage of what he had, so he was very carefully watching Rabbi Yashiv every step he took to see how he davens, what he does, and he noticed a lot of things. But one of the things he pointed out was that Rabbi Yashiv primarily davened a pretty quick Shemona Esrei. He stood right next to him, he watched, and he was able to kind of eavesdrop, so to speak, to hear what was going on. And he said, although he noticed Rabbi Yashiv davened a relatively quick Shemona Esrei, he noticed there was one point where he deliberately slowed down. The words we say right before Moedim, Hamachazir Shechinasa Letziyah, he said you can feel Rabbi Yashiv, as he heard, and he felt, as I stand next to him, in his voice and in his emotion, that Hamachazir Shechinasa Letziyah was something which he was physically shaking by davening, something which really got him to slow down, so to speak, and really put extra kavanah. So I think, Be'ez Hashem, for the chizik and davening probably for the Gula, we shall be Zecher this year to the coming of Mashiach Tzidkeinu here, Amen.
All right. Where's the joke?